Mr. Mack-Poole, 3 minute history. Medicine through time, but I'm going to focus on surgery in the trenches of World War One. So, guys, I've had a lot of you ask me, what are your predictions? What do you think is going to come up? Well, the reason I've chosen surgery in the trenches is because it's the smallest unit out of any, if you think of it, on your exam, okay? Out of Cold War, out of Germany, so paper 3 or paper 2. This part of paper 1 is the smallest unit, the smallest individual unit. And therefore, having looked through what's come up previously, we have noticed that the exam doesn't repeat questions yet. So these are the topics which haven't come up yet. And the first one I want to speak about is mobile X-ray units. These were set up by Marie Curie. Marie Curie invented these. She was Polish by birth, but a naturalized French citizen. And she helped to actually develop X-rays. They were actually discovered by Wilhelm Röntgen in 1895. Now, the reason these mobile X-ray units were so great, well, they're mobile. They can travel to the patient, therefore they're patient friendly. Okay? So that's really good. However, what is bad about them, or what is a limitation, is the fact that they could often break down. Their tubes would overheat. There was even recordings of them burning patients. So that was an obvious drawback and limitation. So if you ask for 2 features, or if you have to give your own knowledge in a source about X-rays, there you go. The next thing I want to speak about is plastic surgery. I couldn't put real photos up here because it'll probably catch a banana, if you know what I mean. But anyway, so Harold Gillies developed this, and it was really effective. A lot of men got shot in the face in the trenches. If you think the face is an obvious place which can be shot, so therefore a lot of them had what was called a fate worse than death. So Harold Gillies had a real moral purpose in developing this. So what he did was develop plastic surgery. He did this with a pedicle tube, and he used to waltz the pedicle tube across the face. He set up a hospital in Sidcup, which is absolutely where I live. So this is local history. He set up in Sidcup. He had blue benches for the men, okay? So they weren't allowed to have any mirrors there, and other patients weren't allowed there because they would stare at them, and that would obviously hurt their psychological recovery, okay? So pedicle tubes, he would waltz the pedicle tubes, blue benches, isolation, no mirrors, okay? So they weren't allowed to see other members of the public, and they weren't allowed mirrors. That is plastic surgery. So I want to speak about shell shock. Shell shock was a neurological disorder, or basically brain damage, which men suffered through either the vibration of the shells or being hit with a shell, or a shell exploding near them, and it damaging their brain. And this wasn't very well understood because neuroscience wasn't very well developed at the time. Shell shock had a range of symptoms, the 1,000-yard stare being amongst the most famous of them. There are also other symptoms such as tremors, okay, having tics afterwards, and the British Army actually shot men for cowardice for exhibiting symptoms of shell shock. However, there were treatments which became available. Sylhane Military Hospital in 1918 was developed for treating shell shock, and men that went there had basically two main forms of treatment. One of them was physiotherapy, okay? The other one was hypnosis, for the tics and the tremors. The last thing I want to speak about is the FANY, okay? This is quite similar to the VAD, the Volunteer Aid Detachment as well. So basically women who volunteered in World War One. So essentially they were middle class women, the FANY, the First Aid Nursing Yeomanry. They were formed in 1907, and they wanted to volunteer and do their bit for the war effort. However, they weren't actually allowed to serve on the front with British men until after 1916. The reason for that is because they thought the front was no place for a woman. Now, the FANY often drove ambulances, even drove mobile bath units, which were heated by the engines of the vehicles which they drove, which would provide men with a clean bath, and they operated casualty clearing stations. Okay, so there we go. That's my video, and these are my predictions for World War One surgery in the trenches on the medicine exam.